Hey everyone, it's Steven. Today I have the 2022 Chevy Corvette convertible 1LT. This is truly one of the most impressive and important vehicles of the last decade. Chevy redesigned the Corvette in 2020 for the new C8 generation, which has been super applauded by critics everywhere, and people just love this vehicle. It transformed it into a mid-engine superstar. That's right, they changed this from the normal front engine to a mid-engine vehicle with the C8 generation. Really shocked people. This car pulls some crazy numbers and is really impressive. The 2022 Chevy Corvette 1LT MSRP is for just above $60,000 for the coupe base trim. The one I have here is actually the convertible model, which means that it comes with the power folding top, and that one MSRP is for about $68,000. As tested, the one I have here comes to about $78,000 because it comes with the Z51 performance package, which is pretty much a necessity if you're going to be buying the new Chevy Corvette. That one comes with a different suspension, electronically limited slip differential, a performance exhaust, all these cool performance upgrades that really are necessary when you want to get a vehicle like this. The Z51 performance package actually ups your horsepower numbers to 495 horsepower and 470 pound-feet of torque. That is all coming out of a 6.2 liter V8 engine. As expected with a true performance vehicle, this comes standard with only rear-wheel drive. You get fuel economy numbers of about 15 city, 27 highway, but for a combined average of about 19 miles per gallon. So obviously not the most fuel efficient thing, but pretty competitive in the class. You've got competitors like the Jaguar F-Type, a really gorgeous car that was also recently redesigned. You have the Porsche family, of course, the Boxster came in 911. You know, depending on what price range you're kind of looking at, those are also very competitive vehicles. This Corvette, probably the most similar comparison would be that Boxster with the convertible top, very similar engine choices depending on what trim you get. And in the 2022 Corvette family, you've got 3 different trims, pretty easy to figure out. You've got 1LT, 2LT, 3LT. The higher the number, the more luxurious it is on the inside. The 1LT is very bare bones, but you also get that low starting price, right? $60,000 for the performance of this vehicle is absurd. And then once you stack up into the 2LT, you get things like blind spot monitors, which doesn't come in the 1LT, which is kind of crazy for an $80,000 vehicle. But you get blind spot monitors, you can get things like front parking sensors, the 360 camera, more leather on the inside, really spicing it up to make it seem more luxurious. But a lot of people will really want to stick with the lower 1LT model because that starting price is very attractive and more affordable than many of the supercars out there, right? With similar performance. That's the really cool part about the Chevy Corvette, is that you get that performance for such a reasonable price. All right, let's talk about the exterior of this 2022 Chevy Corvette. You've got this Arctic white color, which is a no-cost option. Honestly, I would prefer a more flashy color, but in the right lighting and when you clean this car, it does look quite stunning. I do really like this color, but I do think a flashier color like the blue, red would probably suit more people's taste. I really love that blue press release color they have. That one looks awesome. So going along the front of this car, you do have some notable things like your new headlight design in the C8 generation, much more fierce looking. And actually, if you compare this with the C7, you'll notice that this car is just a lot more angular. I think that's the biggest thing Chevy did, is they really, sharpened it up all over the place, right? You have a really pointy front, you have that front splitter at the bottom as well, and you also just have a ton of vents that are all very angular. And it's a very different look from the C7, which looked a little bit more of a normal, smaller supercar type of thing. So I love the design of this. It is very striking. I really think they did a great job redesigning this. To round out the rest of the front fascia, you do have functional vents in the bottom left and bottom right. Those look really nice and are actually functional, which will please a lot of enthusiasts out there. Kind of making your way through the side profile of this vehicle. Also, again, you've got those angular looks. You've got what Chevy actually calls carbon flash, which is really interesting. It's not quite carbon fiber, but it kind of looks like some simulated black plastic, essentially. They have that cladded on the side mirrors and that little side fender on the side that kind of flares out. Going into the side profile, you've got really interesting staggered wheels. 19-inch in the front, 20-inch in the rear. So kind of classic for a performance supercar like this, but it looks okay. I don't think anyone really notices that from a distance. These wheels are pretty dirty at this point, but you can see that they have the Z51 brakes. So they have stronger brakes than the normal C8 that would come without the Z51 performance package. And just so you know, that package is about $6,000 on this one. So quite expensive, but again, I really think it's necessary when you're getting a performance car like this. So going to the back, you'll notice that this is a pretty sloped roofline that you would expect in a lot of more aggressive vehicles, right? This is a very classic look, very reminiscent of things like Lamborghini, right? I think that's really what Chevy was going for. Those exotic looks, but for an affordable price. Going into the rear, they also redesigned this really well in my opinion. You've got those angles, right? You've got the little check marks, very similar to the daytime running lights at the very front of the vehicle. The rear fascia looks good. You have a lot of different options for what you can do with the spoiler. You can have a huge wing, you can have like a mid-sized one, or this one actually has the option to give you a it's called a low profile rear spoiler, which is, I mean, it's pretty low profile, right? You've got the Stingray there, which is really cool. That's just kind of what Chevy calls their models, the Stingray. Certain C whatever generations will have the Stingray nomenclature, which is kind of hard to understand, but it's just the way the body shape looks. And then you've got the Corvette lettering at the very back that looks very luxurious. I like that a lot. You can change the color of it. You can make it blue, red, whatever you really want. I'm glad they stuck with black here. It would have looked really weird in a different color. But the back, you do have some more functional vents. A lot of people really compliment the shape of the back because I think it looks a lot more luxurious and fierce than the previous generations. At the very bottom, you do have quad exhaust pipes. Kind of weird. They're like square, which isn't my favorite thing, but I do think it looks good, right? It's all about the angles. They really wanted to make sure everything looked relatively angular in this vehicle. So while the square exhaust pipes definitely aren't my favorite look, I think the sound more than makes up for it. Let's take a listen right here. Sounds pretty darn good, right? Very comparable with the other supercars that you would be looking at, like the 911 or maybe even the R8. Let's go into the trunk here. So you've got a button down here to open the trunk. You can see it's actually in front of the spoiler. Quite a bit of stuff can fit in here. You've got 12.6 cubic feet of cargo space between the trunk and the frunk. So I'll show you guys the frunk here as well. You can fit a decent amount of stuff here. Definitely not a large bag though. I made the mistake of bringing a large check-in and I couldn't fit it in the vehicle. So definitely be careful and make sure you read the dimensions before you actually fit things. But it is a lot deeper and can really fit a lot of smaller bags than you would expect, which makes this actually a pretty practical daily driver. All right, let's take a look at the interior of the 2022 C8 Corvette here. Before we go in, I'll show you guys the key fob. You've got the nice Corvette logo on it to make sure you don't just have a lowly normal Chevy, right? You've got remote start, you got the trunk and frunk here, and you can actually raise the convertible roof as well, like I've already done here. So one of the few questions will be, how do you get in the car? It's underneath this nice carbon flash black thing right here. It does have proximity keyless entry, so you can just tap it when you have the key next to it. And I mean, just looking at this interior, which is a lot easier to do once you've taken the top down, it looks pretty good. I'll zoom out a bit here before I get in. It is hard to get in, as expected of any vehicle of this size. Every time I get in, it's kind of like a workout. You can kind of see it has a really cool startup sequence, which is pretty awesome. And yeah, you've got the Corvette logo everywhere, right? Chevy wants you to know that you have a special vehicle, not just the normal base Chevy, right? So, I mean, looking around, you do have high quality materials, leather, soft touch material pretty much throughout the entire cabin, very few plastic, everything feels good. Like even these switch knobs feel really good. You've got a Bose sound speaker system, 10 speakers, I believe. In the base, you can get an upgraded one with more speakers, of course. And let's kind of start with the steering wheel here. So with the steering wheel right here, pretty standard Chevy GM product, right? You've got volume controls here, skip track here. These are really laggy from what I've noticed. And when I was using Apple CarPlay, I mean, the amount of time it would take between when I clicked one and you click it from the back to when it actually skipped track was like kind of absurd. You've got Z mode here. You can customize your Z mode to make a, whatever sort of configuration you want to see. And let me actually go ahead and fire up the car as well. It's pretty loud. The startup is always going to be kind of shocking, I think, especially if you're in a garage. You've got paddle shifters as expected. You've got pretty standard things around. But yeah, otherwise the steering wheel is a square, as I'm sure a lot of you guys noticed, which I really like. I thought I wouldn't like it at first, but I've come to appreciate it, and I think it looks pretty neat. These buttons feel fine. It's fine. It's not really deserving of a $80,000 car in my opinion, but it looks fine. So let's go into that 12-inch digital gauge cluster here. So this is something new that Chevy is doing across their entire lineup, which is really cool, and it looks pretty nice, right? You've got a lot of different things here. You've got the V8 here. You've got the your fuel economy. You've got your fuel gauge to the left. All that sort of stuff here. You can customize what shows here, but you can't really customize what shows here. You basically just go through different options here. So yeah, overall you can simplify the display as well, which is kind of cool. But yeah, there's not too many options you have here. It's not nearly as configurable as some of the German rivals. You have the performance timer, which is super cool, lap timer, all these different performance things that come with the Z51 package, and standard trip computer, things like that. So this screen is pretty nice. I think it shows everything that I want it to display, which I like. One thing you guys might have noticed on the steering wheel is that there's no adaptive cruise control in this vehicle. Kind of weird, but one of those side effects of having the base 1LT trim. No blind spot monitors in the mirrors or anything like that. But I will specify one really cool thing I like is this rear view camera. This is actually the first vehicle I've had with it, but you basically touch this button and it becomes a camera. Notice you can't actually see it when I do it with the top down. You can't actually use this with the top down because it's integrated with the top, but I'll show you guys basically what it looks like here, and it looks pretty sweet. Very HD, and it works well at nighttime too, which is kind of impressive. Going into the screen here, this is a very small 8-inch infotainment system, which is actually geared towards the driver, which I think is kind of cool. Bad for the passenger because they can't really see much, but the driver actually gets to see this, and you know, it looks fine. It's very small, and I do think they could probably design a cooler way of doing this, but Apple CarPlay looks fine. Takes up the whole screen. Android Auto, wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto are standard on this, which is pretty neat. That's a good thing to have in the base trim. But yeah, it's pretty responsive. I like the screen. It looks fine. Nothing to really compliment about this. It is laggy a few times, but you know, it's definitely not as up to speed as some of the German rivals that you would expect. But you know, it's pretty nice for a sports car, for a Chevy, I guess. So you have a home button at the top, you have volume control, things like that, pretty standard. You've got really easy to adjust vents here as well, which I kind of like. You can kind of see that same design throughout the entire cabin. And yeah, a lot of leather, like I said. So a lot of stitching. It looks pretty upscale. You've got the nice Chevy logo, or Corvette logo here. Don't want to say Chevy. And it looks nice. These are the mode selectors here. It's actually hidden behind this little thing here, so you can kind of choose your different drive modes. I'll show you, they actually show a different thing on the 12-inch display here, depending on what drive mode you're in. So pretty neat look there. You've got traction control, and you've got your normal gear selectors. Kind of weird for reverse, you pull up, drive, you pull up, and then all the other ones are just buttons. You've got manual mode as well. 2 cup holders in the middle here, and one other cup holder here, which is kind of disguised here. You can actually see you've got the Corvette Stingray lettering right there as well, and there's a speaker. So let's go into the seats here. These are the GT1 seats that come in the 1LT trim, and honestly, they're pretty nice for standard seats, right? Like, these are really comfortable, well bolstered. They're not like super thick, I guess I would say. They're a little, you know, plastic in the back, you can kind of tell. You actually have some more storage here if you ever want to throw things back there, by the way. But yeah, you've got the standard stitching. I like the white contrast stitching, it looks fine. The seats are very comfortable for a long car ride, so I think that's one thing I was really impressed by. Overall, the cabin feels pretty upscale. This row of things really, I didn't like it at first, but it's pretty easy to use, right? Like, you have physical buttons to choose what your temperature controls are. You have dual zone climate control as expected. And overall, I really think this cabin is a lot more comfortable than the C7. Chevy did a great job making this car a lot more comfortable and upscale, and really worthy of that $60,000 base starting price. And then you've got the button to get yourself out here. Just a button. So basically, you don't have to actually use, I mean, when I first got in the car, I was like, how in the world do I get out? There's no actual handle, but just a button, pretty neat. You do have a few neat buttons near the driver's side door panel here, where this one controls the convertible rooftop, and this one actually controls this little window in the back that kind of acts as a windbreaker to help make your ride a bit more seamless and more comfortable when you want the top down, so it's not super windy and everything. When you actually put that window up and you put your normal windows up like this, like, it's actually shockingly very not loud in the vehicle while you're driving with the top down, which is pretty incredible. And I'll show you guys here what it looks like to actually put the top down. It's a pretty cool operation. It takes about 15 seconds, and you can do it at any speed lower than 30 miles per hour. So you can actually do it in stop and go traffic if it starts raining or something like that, which is always pretty cool option. All right, guys, how does the 2022 Chevy Corvette drive? I'm sure that's the question a lot of enthusiasts are asking themselves. Does it stack up with the competition? I honestly think it exceeds everything of what you would ever expect. I mean, like I said before, everyone is applauding this car. No one has really said that this car is not worth it. The affordable price, the looks, everything about it is really a knockout of the park from Chevy. One thing I want to notice, which is pretty cool, are at the stoplight, the sound of the turn signal. It's like a heartbeat, right? Like, it's very different from the normal turn signal that has the very steady beat. This one's a little off, right? Which I think is really cool. It's like kind of one of those neat Easter eggs they put in to show you that, you know, this car will get your heart racing. All right, I'll try to get some revs here really quickly. That is in touring mode, which is impressive, right? I really couldn't go that fast, but again, this car is 0 to 60 in 2.9, and that is lightning fast. Let's try to get a better one here. If I go into track mode here, really boosts up the revs, and I mean, track mode is pretty crazy. You guys can hear it here. Sounds pretty incredible. I've always been blown away by it. Honestly, it's a little too much performance for me. I think touring mode is very comfortable as a daily driver. Sport mode is kind of a nice even. It helps make you feel like you're driving a sportier car, but it's not over the top. Track mode is a little bit crazy, and the suspension gets a little too firm for me, a little jarring, and the transmission can feel a little jerky. So definitely don't recommend staying in track mode for daily use, but for everyday driving, touring is ridiculously comfortable. I will say in general, road noise and wind noise is a bit higher than you would expect from a more luxury vehicle. The tires do a fine job of absorbing the bumps and imperfections in the road, but it's a sports car at the end of the day. It's a low sports car, and that's just going to have repercussions in terms of how loud the inside of the cabin is. And I think Chevy did a pretty good job with this. I mean, wind noise, it gets pretty high if you're driving above 50 miles per hour, especially on the freeway. Road noise, equally loud, but it's really not something you wouldn't already expect given the type of vehicle this is. And like I said, when you're driving this in touring mode, it is a comfortable cruiser. These seats are really nice, and like you can relax in these seats pretty nice. The headrest is great. I think the contouring really fits most body shapes. You've got 8-way adjustable seats, and the armrests easy to use, and just I have thoroughly enjoyed driving this car. Everything from comfortable daily driver to sports car, right? So like you have that wide variety of uses, and I think that's what the C8 Corvette does better than the previous generations. It's really that all-around vehicle now. It really is a daily driver, and I think anyone who tells you that it's not a daily driver does not really understand how you can use this thing, right? Like, I've been able to spend a week in the Bay Area with this vehicle, putting my bags in and stuff like that, and it hauls groceries, you can get most things, and it's comfortable and quiet, and you have that convertible option as well, right? When the temperature's right, and it just feels amazing. I think this car is just a 10 out of 10 vehicle, probably my favorite vehicle I've ever driven aside from maybe the Porsche. So I think like Porsche is kind of their only competition. But again, Porsche is going to be so much more expensive, right? An equivalent Cayman GTS or Boxster GTS or something like that is going to be so much more expensive. Of course, more luxurious. I will note that the interior fit and finish is a little questionable. I don't know if it's just the specific car I got off Turo, but like it's kind of rattly in here when I'm even at low speeds, high speeds, whenever, like turning. There's just kind of rattles, and I think some of it is the convertible top. I've checked and made sure that it's not unsecure and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, I just feel like the fit and finish on this car doesn't quite match some of the luxury rivals. But again, the price, right? It makes sense, and that's why this car is so good. It is the price of this vehicle. So the only negatives about this car really are maybe some of the aging tech, the lack of standard safety features in the base trim, which you can remedy by getting the 2LT instead, and maybe the polarizing styling, right? But like, it's hard to come up with negatives for this car. This car is just such an all-around great vehicle, and I mean, even with the tech, right, they do really cool things. So for example, they have a V8 standard, right? And it actually can go into V4 mode and deactivate half of its cylinders when you're driving for fuel efficiency. So that's pretty much all I wanted to talk through today with this vehicle. I have loved this car, probably my favorite car I've ever driven, honestly, if not in the top 3 at least. So definitely recommend getting your hands on one to try and test it out, really feel that power and the comfort of this vehicle. So impressive how Chevy balanced that. If you want to check out some of my other videos, click up here and you can subscribe down here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video. Bye.